The Data Nerd, Episode 3, Transitioning into Data Analytics Consulting.
And that's what's really led me down this whole journey of starting as a freelance consultant and ultimately growing into a consulting agency.
The change, like the ability to do different things and not always do the same thing.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot faster pace, and that's not to say that if you are working just a normal job that you have to necessarily do the same thing over and over again.
Welcome to the Data Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, Nisar Ahmed. Join me as we explore the inner data nerd inside all of us. Dive into the world of data alongside special guests who not only share their wealth of experience and knowledge, but also unveil what truly makes them data nerds. This podcast is brought to you by Business Intelligence. That's BIZNIS Intelligence. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Business Intelligence to stay up to date with Tableau training and the Data Nerd podcast. Connect with me on LinkedIn or stream the Data Nerd podcast across all major podcast platforms. Welcome, everyone, to the Data Nerd podcast. I have the pleasure of welcoming Luke Komiskey today. Luke is the founder and CEO of DataDrive, a data consultancy providing managed analytics services. With an ongoing partnership, DataDrive helps growing mid-sized organizations transform their disparate, messy data into insight, providing both the reporting platform and data team for delivering faster, informed decisions. Over the last 7 years, Luke has grown DataDrive into a worldwide team of highly skilled professionals, serving over 175 organizations, including media agencies, public school systems, manufacturers, and more. So welcome, Luke, to the Data Nerd podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. So what I like to do is I ask a little icebreaker to all of my guests. This is a Data Nerd podcast. I talk about what makes me a data nerd or why I'm a data nerd and at what point I realized I was one. So short story for me, as a kid, I grew up playing video games and I started recording the data that I used to play. I used to have tournaments with my brother. And then that's kind of when I realized that I love this stuff. I love data. And then that's kind of what ended up happening, leading my way into my data analytics journey. So my question for you, Luke, is, are you a data nerd? And if you are, or if so, tell me your story and when you realized you are one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all in on being a data nerd. And I think I've had little moments of that like throughout my childhood.
Mm.
The big moment for me is I remember during college, I played a lot of Halo growing up online, and Microsoft had this really complex algorithm for scoring people and providing a really interesting ranking system for online whatever.
Mm.
Uh, During college, I played a lot of Settlers of Catan. I'm very much into board games, and we
Yeah.
would have a group of us that would always be playing, but we'd play at different times with different people. And what I started requesting people to do is record when they placed their settlements, what turn order it was, how many points they ended up with, random other pieces of information. And I used all of that to create the CPI, the Catan Power Index, that leveraged the algorithm that Microsoft was using for ranking for Halo matchmaking. And that was like my ultimate like peak of, all right, I'm a data nerd. I love this stuff. And
Yeah,
now I continue doing it every day.
that's awesome. And when you combine that with something you love, like you love video games, right? It kind of grows your passion and data. I don't know if, are you into sports?
Yeah, I'm into sports.
So do you play fantasy football or any other sports?
I used to play fantasy way too much, and then once I became a dad, I backed off a little bit.
I mean, I do it for fun. I don't even put money into it, but I actually just love it for the data aspect, right? There's so much analysis involved in fantasy sports. So, I love sports. I love data as well. So that's a great story. So love hearing that. So I wanted to talk to you today. Like, really, the topic for today is about transitioning into consulting or data consulting, really, and there's no better person to talk to about that than you, because I think you've gone through that journey, right? So do you want to talk a little bit about your journey? Maybe you want to talk about what motivated you to transition into data analytics consulting, and then talk a little bit about that journey and what steps were involved in that transition.
Yeah, there's a few key moments throughout my career. So, quick background is I graduated with a computer science degree, and then my first job out of college was working as a data engineer in corporate America at a place called Cargill, which is the world's largest private company that I feel like only half of the world actually know exist.
Mhm.
So, really cool opportunity to see data operations at a large scale. But during my time at Cargill, I worked alongside a lot of Accenture and Deloitte consultants, and it always seemed like they were working on really interesting projects to help kind of like push the envelope of what we were trying to do as employees at Cargill. Through a series of introductions, I got introduced and ultimately made my way over to become an analytics consultant with another firm. And it was like during that time where like I figured out kind of laying the groundwork of understanding what it takes to consult. The different skill sets is not just about understanding technology, but being able to work with people, understand their business, understand what kind of outcomes they're trying to create out of the business, which was compared to my experience as an employee was a lot of as an employee, I always got a lot of like, these are the things I need to do for the week. And for a
Hmm.
consultant, it was more of this is what we need to achieve in the next 6 months. How are we going to get there? And I loved piecing together that puzzle a little bit more.
Yeah.
That final moment for me before I got like onto my own consulting, my solo consulting journey was in 2016. My wife and I did a quarter life retirement where we traveled the world for a year. Of course, being the data guy that I am, I had the spreadsheet that was tracking our money, and like $50 a day per person was my KPI that I was measuring throughout the year. But it was during that time where I started picking up freelance contracts as just like a Tableau developer. I have a lot of experience working with Tableau prior to this,
Yeah.
and yeah, for me, it was just like getting that first step into getting that first freelancing engagement. If I was able to work 10 hours a week on the road in Southeast Asia, I was like, when I returned to the United States, it'd be interesting to see like what this could look like at scale. And that's what's really led me down this whole journey of starting as a freelance consultant and ultimately growing into a consulting agency.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, a lot to digest there, right? And so I have a few thoughts. Okay, some questions come to mind. Number one, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think what you're trying to say is the difference between consulting, or what drew you towards that was um the change, like the ability to do different things and not always do the same thing, that perhaps as a full-time employee you may be doing mundane tasks or doing the same routine over and over again, whereas with consulting, each project is different and you have to learn new things. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Is that correct?
Yeah, it definitely is a lot faster pace, and that's not to say that if you are working just a normal job that you have to necessarily do the same thing over and over again. But my
Yeah.
experience was that as a data engineer or a report developer, you slowly build up a bunch of assets that you've built, and you're probably going to be asked to maintain it because you're the best person equipped to maintain that. What I loved about consulting is that it's incredibly fast paced. You come into a place and are your agenda is to help move the needle of whatever the reason why they're paying you to come in, and you have to move really quickly as the play the new guy card, understand their business, build something that is actually going to achieve the outcomes that they're looking for. And then as soon as you're wrapped up with that, you're on to the next project. And I felt like in my short experience just doing formal consulting and then now running a consulting agency for the last 7 years,
Mm.
my network and my understanding of how organizations make money and how businesses operate has grown exponentially because it is so much more faster pace. It's a totally different realm than my experiences in corporate America.
Yeah, and sometimes when you put under the pressure, right, the fast pace, um, would you say it's not for everybody, right? It takes a certain type of person to do consulting or fast pace, or would you recommend that everyone give it a try? Like, is there certain personality types that might be better at it than others?
Uh, yeah, I think it's not for everyone,
Yeah.
and I don't think every job is not for everyone. So I think consulting kind of takes its own, I don't know, its own style to it. I don't know if it's necessarily a personality style, although I
Mm,
think a lot of personalities that I find are tend to be a lot more of these like type A driven people that are really comfortable in ambiguity. And for
mm,
some people, like constantly being put outside of your comfort zone, like is incredibly uncomfortable to the point of like, I don't, this isn't fun for me to be at work anymore. So I think there's that sense of learning on the fly And once you get in, like I encourage everyone to try consulting at some point, just because I think you will see a faster pace, a different style of learning, being thrown into a room as like the expert of something that you just had to like cram in before you got to a client site. I mean, those are all just life experiences that you just kind of get to experience in consulting, where I think, at least from my experiences in corporate America, it was a lot more, let's be mindful about where you are in the development journey, not, stretch you too much,
Yeah.
give you some opportunities. It's just a different flavor, but it's definitely not for everyone.
Yeah. And okay, so I've dipped my toe into consulting, not my own freelance consulting, but I worked for a consulting firm. Okay. So here's what I found was the difference, right? In corporate America, working for a company, I have a role. Okay, let's just say I'm a Tableau developer. Okay, I'm given task. I build dashboards. I have stakeholders within the company, and they ask for dashboards. You have the whole process of intake, development, production, whatever it may be. Okay, similar type of thing in consulting as well. Now, the difference that I see is that in consulting, everything's got to be tied or billable. And um, at least personally, at least from my experience, I found it was hard for me to spend time in personal development because I had to bill everything to a client. Um, Whereas in a corporate job, I could carve out some of that time on my own without having to give a reason on why I'm taking that much time to work on personal development.
Yeah, that's fair. I think when you get into consulting, there's that whole concept of, there's 40 hours in a week,
Yeah.
billable hours. That is really the lifeblood of how so many of these consultancies need to exist, is you have to spend time working on something that can be billed to a client so we can make revenue so we can pay you. And so that completely changes your perspective of a given week. I will say, like, caveat that I think there's a lot of different ways consulting agencies can set up their billing model.
Hmm.
A very common one is this whole time and materials hourly. But I hear you that when you get into those situations, it can be almost like very anxiety inducing, because
Yeah.
it's just like every single hour you're like, what am I working on? What do I need to do? And what I preach so much for people who get into consulting, and my agency is quite different than like that model,
Yeah.
but just making sure that you're being very mindful about calendar ownership and blocking off time so that you have the professional development, and it's already, people will find a way to fill in any gaps in your calendar with meetings. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
with consulting, it's even more important to protect that calendar.
Yeah. And I don't think that's just a consulting thing. I think that's in any type of job
Oh,
that's the
100%.
case. Yeah. Um, so okay, so we're talking about consulting, but I want to touch a little bit on like freelancing as well, right? Okay. So whether you're working for a consulting firm or you're working for DataDrive, right? You have employees. But let's suppose you're somebody who's looking to, you know, start your own business, get your own clients, okay, and then maybe transition into that, becoming full time, okay.
Mhm.
So this is a thought that a lot of people have, and I've had discussions with people about this, and I think the biggest obstacle there is the unknown and maybe some of the financial instability initially, right? You know that you're getting a paycheck when you're working for an employer, right? You know exactly how much you're going to make. You also know that if you start your own business, the ceiling may be higher, but the floor is also there and exists. And then, especially if you have a family, you have a mortgage, you have payments, you want to make sure that you have some sort of stability, right? So, can you talk to people who are kind of thinking about starting their own business or freelancing or consulting?
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there, and
Yeah, I
all
know.
yeah, all of that is like very true. The beauty of like going off and freelancing or building any kind of business is, yes, the ceiling is quite a bit higher, but also that floor is also dangerously lower.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things that people may not appreciate as much, because maybe in their organization they are the go-to person for all of the technical questions, and everyone loves using them as the resource. And unfortunately, for going off, whether freelancing or building your own consultancy, I would say the toughest part is always lead or customer acquisition. being able to put yourself out there and like figure out what are the avenues in which I'm going to find somebody who actually is going to pay me for my expertise. There's a lot of ways that you can build that kind of funnel. There's the normal freelance platforms that are becoming more and more populated every day, like Upwork and Fiverr.
Mm.
There are like referral agencies where they can help get you into a place, but they're going to take a certain cut of your hourly rates. And it's sort of like having a job, but it's like a middle ground between being a freelancer and being employed. But then the ultimate goal, in my opinion, is to like find a way that you can bring in customers reliably over and over again. And I think making that leap is probably one of the toughest parts. I think you can be still quite successful as a freelancer using any of the other avenues that I've described. But if you're ultimately looking to scale up a business, it's about being able to fish on your own and find those next customers. The the thing that I would when I talk to people about trying to take this leap into freelancing is everyone thinks that it's just like this one day that you quit your job, storm out, and then like go start your
Yeah.
business. And one thing I encourage for people is like think about try it out. Like if respect your employment agreements, whatever's in place, but try freelancing for a little bit, see how that feels. See if you can contribute 5 hours to a given project. Slowly start building up a name for yourself so that when if you want to make this epic leap, that already includes a bunch of paying customers that are ready to go with you.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Like you started off part-time, see how it goes, get a feel for it, right? But I heard you talking about like getting so there's a sales aspect to this, right? And here's the thing, when we're like our most people who are in analytics are educated and trained from the on the technical side of things, and we don't really know how to sell, right? And so how do you teach people how to sell or market yourself if that's not something you have? Or I mean, I don't know. But what
Yeah.
advice do you have there?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very, very real experience I went through. Like, I have a computer science background. I was in corporate America as a developer. And for me, I had to learn by watching other people at my consulting firm sell solutions, even like what does selling involve? How do you put yourself out there? How do you bring somebody along on that journey? I think a lot of times people's experience with either sales reps or past sale motions, sales can feel really slimy to people. Like I don't really want to like force somebody to buy something that they don't need.
Yeah.
But sales is around like finding people that need help and having the confidence of knowing that you can deliver that help for them. But it is by far, I would say, like the toughest part of being able to grow and build anything. And the reason why most people don't start a business, I think the big piece for, especially for like data professionals, is to understand what is like the value that I'm actually bringing as a data employee. I think oftentimes when I see people set up freelancing operations, and I did this 7 years ago. I said, "Hey, I'm really good at data analysis and I can build a fantastic Tableau dashboard." But unfortunately, in the open market, nobody's actually looking for a Tableau dashboard. They're looking to solve a problem that is in front of their face. And so you
Yeah.
got to flip your language so that it solves their problem. And it might be a Tableau dashboard, but they actually don't care that you can build a Tableau dashboard. That's not what they're searching for.
Yeah, they want to solve problems, right? And you're there to provide the solution. Um, but uh, working in corporate America, you're kind of doing the same thing for your employer, are you not? They hired you for a reason. They have a need. There's problems, and you're solving solutions. Whether you think about it or not, you're kind of an internal consultant in some ways. You have stakeholders. You have business partners. You have people that you need to deliver this to. So I don't think the role itself is a little bit different. It's just maybe that you have full control from A to Z of the whole process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the yin and the yang, right? Like you have the full control, but also you're responsible for the full control of that. At least
Yeah,
within within a job. If they don't have work for you, they will probably find work for you. But at least at a minimum, you'll get that paycheck on the upcoming Friday. But I do think that you can flex a lot of the skills of selling internally. You don't have to be like a formal consultant title to do this. It's even if you found success with selling the value of the solutions that you've built, maybe you've used that to parlay that into like a promotion or a pay raise. Those are all selling skills.
yeah,
You just need to like look at it differently, but you can still flex those muscles internally for sure.
yeah. So, what are some of the challenges that you may see that individuals face when they do the transition? I mean, it's not as it can't be as easy as you're talking about it. You make it sound very nice um and achievable, and you've been very successful at it, right? But not 100% of people who give it a try succeed at it. There are challenges that people face, and you may have faced some challenges. So, what are some challenges that people can kind of expect, or maybe you can talk about some of your experience on some of the challenges?
Yeah, it's definitely not all sunshine and roses. There's a lot more up and down that I think just happens. Whether you're in any kind of entrepreneurship or freelancing, there tends to be a little bit more of a roller coaster in all aspects of life. The from just a pure like revenue perspective, like you're not guaranteed a paycheck every month or every week.
Mm,
Often, I think one of the skills that I've even had to grown into is doing a like understanding more about accounting, financing, how to deal with the waves of how different times you might have a lot of work and other times you might have very little work, and how do you smooth that out so that you can actually do some like cash flowing against that. We've already talked a little bit about just customer acquisition. I think is one mistake that I often see just early freelancers make is they get that first contract and then they go hard at delivering that. And what they do is they'll work 5 days a week and completely shut off any kind of business development activities, no marketing, no sales conversations, no prospecting. And there's a lot of what they'll talk about in the freelance world of like feast or famine, of having a project and then that ends and all of a sudden you're going back to a 0 week.
yeah,
And if you haven't been keeping warm conversations going, I mean, sales conversations don't happen overnight. They take a series of meetings and a series of weeks. So always making sure that you're filling that hopper of that next project that you want to take on is it's a tricky balance for people. But early on, I would dedicate 4 8 hours a week on finding that next project.
yeah. So let's talk about that networking portion, right? How do you network? Is it in person, online, both? And what's the best way to network or find clients or customers or projects?
Yeah, all the above. I pre COVID, I did a lot of like in person events. I think post COVID, conferences are okay way to find potential prospects. One thing to think about though is if you plan on going to places like Tableau conference and to sell work, you have to keep in mind that 80 90% of the audience are fellow Tableau developers or consultants. So there's not going to be that many paying customers necessarily there for you.
Yeah,
Uh,
unless you're there to recruit people or hire people, right?
right, exactly. Uh, yeah, the other ways is just like the way that I've really approached it is just doing a little bit of everything. I am very active on LinkedIn. I try my best to post almost on a daily basis just to stay top of mind for people. There is a lot of LinkedIn messaging and emailing I do with people that I've talked to in the past, checking in on deployments, just kind of always keeping warm conversations going. And because at the end of the day, like I don't want to just constantly be selling to people. It's about building relationships, nurturing
Mm.
relationships, like actually caring about what their outcome is going to be. I think people can very much see through if you're like always reaching out right when you need a project, that feels very transactional to people. And so I think the tough balance is like you always need to be taking little steps to stay in contact with people. I've been doing this long enough now that even people that I've like met as fellow Tableau developers have been promoted up into roles where they've got budget to like do additional solutions, right? So
Mm.
it's kind of the networking effect. The power of a good network will continue to exponentially increase and make it easier for you if you were ever interested in going to freelance.
So if you're okay, a lot of people in analytics, okay, I'm talking about data analytics, right? We have profiles, right? Let's take Tableau as an example, right? You have Tableau Public, and people have profile on Tableau Public that they can showcase, and a lot of people use that for, if they're looking for jobs, they can use that. Um, but I guess for consulting, it could work as well, right? If you want to start consulting and Tableau's you like your niche, right? Um,
Mhm.
just the portfolio in itself can sell uh rather than like, but I don't know, like what do you think, like can you just get a cold message somebody and be like, oh, okay, I know you're looking for something. Here's my profile. What do you think? Or do you still need to provide more context there on, other ways that you can help them?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, having a portfolio definitely helps. I do a lot of recruiting in this space, and so I'm always looking for quality versus quantity. I don't really care if your Tableau Public has 500 different dashboards out there. If there's like two or three really good ones, those are the ones that I'm gonna be honing in
Mm,
on. And it can be a great. I mean, whether you're trying to find a job or trying to get a gig as a freelancer or whatever, these portfolio pages can be incredibly beneficial, right? They help you stand out and get that face to face interview. So that's already like the hardest jump of either getting a full time job or getting an opportunity to get a paid engagement somewhere. But even then, I would encourage you, like if you're doing LinkedIn direct messages or emailing somebody, that it shouldn't be a generic like, "Hey, look at this dashboard. Do you want one of these?" Because you're asking your prospect to make a lot of leaps of, "Okay, I see a dashboard, but like, what's the problem I need to solve? What's my pain point? What do I want to actually pay for?"
yeah.
That's a lot of jumps that somebody has to make to figure out, do I want to work with you? But if you have a portfolio page that like maybe solves something like, uh, it's checking for like loss on your e-commerce cart. If it's monitoring the population of a health and like a health outcome in a certain geographical area. If it's like a pricing and promotion analysis, like that can be interesting when you try to take that to somebody who's in that particular vertical and says, "Wow, that's a really interesting way to visualize that information. Our organization could use that." Less jumps that they need to do, so it's easier to sell. So
Yeah.
I prefer those over like the visual resumes don't really do much for me. If it's more of a targeted use case, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So I just thought of a question. If let's suppose I'm looking for a consultant, okay, and I reach out to you and I give you a project and you know how to do 80% of it, okay? It's 20% you don't know how to do. Do you still take it on or do you tell them upfront that, okay, I can do 80% of this, but I can't do this 20%? Or do you like outsource and find others or work with others to try to get that done?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the honesty up front about what you're capable of doing, whether it's your team, yourself. I think when you're starting out as a freelancer in particular, you know better than anyone else what you're capable of doing. And I think it will only serve you well to say like, this is an area that I'm comfortable in, love to explore this other area I don't know as much about. And if anything, like you're being honest about it so that that client can choose to, the final 20% doesn't need to be done, or maybe they are willing to help fund that education for you. I think over time, as like I've built out more of a team and just a network of contractors, I have a lot more confidence that we'd be able to solve the end-to-end solution because I know people that have that experience to fill in. But I think when you're first starting out, I think the honesty around what your core capabilities are, because it's going to be you delivering it. If you don't have subcontractors lined up, you can get into a world of hurt by trying to sell something that you really don't have a solution for, even through subcontractor means behind the scenes.
I guess it's similar to like even if you have an interview, right? Or you have a resume, you don't want to lie to them because once they hire you, they're gonna realize that you don't know it, right?
Yeah.
The more honest you are and upfront you are, the better it is for you.
Yeah, like in general, that's a big thing that when I got into consulting, I kind of viewed these as like smartest person in the room, expert in the room. And what I've appreciated about just where I found my home in consulting, and I think other really great consultants I've met in my life, is they are very open about what they do and don't know, but they are masters in the ability to be resourceful to find answers. I think at the end of the day, I think my superpower is being able to find answers wherever they may be, whether it's in my community, my network, past clients that I've worked with. More than anything, I care about outcomes and I want people to have confidence that I'm going to be able to track down that answer. That's where my confidence comes from when I'm taking on engagements. Is I will find the answer. I don't know everything. I will never claim to know everything, but I can certainly track down the answers to find it.
Yeah, and I think that's true not just in consulting. I think in any line of work, right? Like nobody knows all the answers. And even in my full-time job, if somebody asks me for something, I'll tell them whether I know it or not. But what I'll also say is I'll try to find a solution for you, and I'll leverage my resources to figure it out, right?
Mhm.
So I teach a class, data analytics class, right? And a lot of students, what they come, the questions that they come to me with are, they're afraid. They're not sure like if they'll know enough to get the job or do the job. And what I tell them is that never be afraid to take on something that you don't know, because um, you'll learn it, right? If they're going to hire you, they have confidence in you enough to know that you're smart enough to figure it out and learn it. They're not necessarily expecting that you know everything, but that you have the resources to figure it out. And I think that's true regardless if it's in consulting or in a full-time gig.
Yep. Yeah, I think more than anything, it's just like the authenticity, right? The when I'm trying to recruit for people, I can read right away if they are just pumping up their chest saying like I know everything versus hey, like these are the things I'm good at, these are the things I'm looking to grow in. I mean, I'll take those people all day because I can feel
Yeah,
that authenticity.
yeah, of course, of course. Okay, so what advice would you give to someone who's considering making that transition, right? Just speaking from your own personal experience.
Yeah, transitioning into data freelancing, consultant,
All of the above.
all the above. Yeah, there's so many pieces of advice, but I think the big one is be willing to bet on yourself.
Mm.
Doesn't necessarily need to be this epic leap into freelancing, but if it is truly if freelancing or running a business or whatever is on your bucket list or things you want to achieve in your life, like one of the best ways that you can learn a lot about yourself, challenge yourself, make yourself uncomfortable, I've found by leaping into data freelancing, trying to start a business. I've learned more about how I operate, how I think. I've learned a ton about business operations by doing this. Your journey might be very different, but if nothing else, I subscribe to a life well lived. And it could be a very exciting chapter that I would hate for anyone to look back on a life of regret.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes the leaps that you don't take, you'll look back and you'll regret not doing it, right? And I guess there's no harm, right? Like, taking the shot. And I know from your experience, that's what you did, right? I mean, you kind of started. Uh, well, I don't know if if you would advise everyone to take a backpack and take time off and travel the world, but that's what it took for you to kind of get to where you are, and whatever it takes other people might be something else, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Awesome.
you definitely do not need to do an epic global adventure. It's fun, but you don't need to do
It,
it.
no, it does sound very fun actually. And actually it's something that you took advantage of, because at that time you were able to do it, and you don't
Mhm.
look back at that with any regrets. If anything, it's something that you're fortunate for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning about people's risk profiles of jumping into freelancing, right? Like now I've got two kids running around this world. I've got a
yeah,
mortgage to pay for. Like my risk profile will be very different now. So I'm so glad I made the leaps that I did, and just understanding, yeah, there's just different appetite for risk at different stages of life, and that happens at different times for different people.
yeah, of course. No, but this was great, Luke. The time passed by really quick. I'm sure we could have talked a little bit more, but please let us know how people could get in touch with you and connect with you.
Yeah, so feel free to check out our website at godatadrive.com, godatadrive.com. And I'm also incredibly active on LinkedIn, like I mentioned. So
Mm,
feel free to connect, reach out on direct message. I'm happy to exchange more contact information there.
great, perfect. Thank you so much, Luke. This is great. I'm sure this will be helpful to many people, and looking forward to keeping in touch and speaking in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, thanks, Luke.